So I'm starting to reconnect with some of my scientist friends from Facebook that I've lost due to being banned from Facebook for the whole, posting news reports about black crime. So basically, I'm starting to get back in touch with some of my scientist friends, and it's encouraging me to again pursue more aggressively the promotion of life extension. And what I want to point out is there are some of my favorite authors, barring the actual professional gerontologists and the textbooks on gerontology. I have a large number of textbooks on biogerontology, like Denham Harnum's book, and a lot of professional gerontologists that have contributed to a lot of these biogerontological textbooks that deal with, theories of aging and things like that. And I'm going to review those textbooks after I'm done reading them. It's going to be quite a while because a lot of them are far larger than the Bible, Quran, and Bhagavad Gita combined. But some of my favorite authors, and you'll notice there's a lot of a lot of differences in how some of these people approach the longevity question, but there are some universals, okay? So Dr. Robert C. Atkins, I believe to be number one, okay? Dr. Robert C. Atkins is probably who I would consider my number one go-to source, particularly for supplement knowledge, okay? The two books that I recommend everybody read by Dr. Robert C. Atkins are the Atkins Age-Defying Diet and the Atkins Vitanutrient Solution. Those two books are indispensable to a person that is pursuing a long and healthy life. Number two, and it might surprise you that they're number two, is Dirk Pearson and Sandy Shaw. Dirk Pearson and Sandy Shaw were big in the 80s, 70s, and 80s. They appeared on a lot of talk shows. I have a playlist of them, and I'm going to leave links to a playlist about Dr. Atkins and Dirk Pearson and Sandy Shaw, and the next guy, which will be Roy Walford. But Dirk Pearson and Sandy Shaw showed the need to use mega doses of supplements to achieve anti-aging results. I recommend reading their books, Life Extension, A Practical and Scientific Approach, and also the Life Extension Companion, as well as the Life Extension Weight Loss Guide. Okay, there's 3 books by them. I recommend that people read all of them. Okay. So then you have Dr. Roy Walford, the guy that discovered the idea of CRON, caloric restriction with optimized nutrition. I highly recommend his books, particularly the 120-Year Diet, and I recommend people read like Maximum Lifespan and the 120-Year Diet, which are 2 of his books. I'll be doing reviews of them eventually. I don't know why I haven't done reviews of them yet. I might have to reread them and brush up on some of the details in those books. But the gist of it is if you reduce your caloric intake and increase your micronutrient density, it generally speaking, increases the lifespan of pretty much every organism, from yeast to fruit flies to worms to like nematode worms to frogs to monkeys. It generally increases the lifespan of every organism that caloric restriction with optimized micronutrient nutrition has been practiced on. But of course, you can't restrict total calories too much because you will have starvation. And I'm going to get into in later videos why I'm not a big believer in aggressive caloric restriction. So going from Roy Walford, I would recommend the writings of Walter Longo, who is the protege of Dr. Walford, and that people read his book, The Longevity Diet. I also did a review of his book. I'm not crazy about it, but I do like the idea of what you are eating on the diet. Then you go from him, I would recommend people read the writings of the bodybuilder, Bill Pearl. I think that bodybuilding, at least the exercises of bodybuilding and a bodybuilding routine, particularly one for health, is very important. I would recommend reading his book, Keys to the Inner Universe, which I will be doing a review of in the near future, which goes over every load-bearing exercise for literally every part of the body besides, and again, the negative is he doesn't cover the grip. He doesn't cover grip or pelvic floor exercises. These are the 2 things that I noticed, 3 things really, that are never covered in depth enough in exercise manuals, are the pelvic floor exercises, so that you have a strong, healthy pelvic floor. And also the grip is not covered, how to develop a powerful crushing grip, and nor is how to strengthen your lower back. These are three things that for whatever reason, they're not, and rarely, although in Bill Pearl's book you do see it, rarely do you see strengthening the neck mentioned. Okay, and Bill Pearl does actually give a wonderful little diagram in the book about all of the micronutrients that are required for health and proper amounts and things like that. It's very nice, the little diagram he gives. And he also gives a little portion on what's his name? Saxon, Arthur Saxon, I believe his name is, the Jewish guy from Germany that was a strong man. He's considered the first modern day bodybuilder. I think it's Arthur Saxon. I forget his name off the top of my head. Then going from Bill Pearl, I would recommend people read a lot of the books by, believe it or not, Mantak Chia. Mantak Chia is actually a Taoist person. He practices Taoism. He has an organization called the Healing Tao. And I recommend people read his books on meditative exercises and unique exercises. And interestingly enough, he does include exercises for the pelvic floor. Okay, the pelvic floor is very, very, very ignored when people are talking about exercises for longevity, and I don't understand why, because it's very important. It helps to prevent things like just losing your bowels, losing your ability to control your urination. It helps prevent erectile dysfunction. It helps preserve the strength of erections. It's thought to maybe increase male fertility. It helps women with a lot of issues. In fact, most pelvic floor exercises in modern times were created for women. But Mantak Chia, being that Taoism and Tantric Yoga utilize a lot of pelvic conditioning, obviously because there's a lot of ritualistic sex in both Tantra and Taoism. There's a lot of exercises in Taoism and Tantric Yoga to tone the pelvic floor muscles for those reasons. And after that, I would go into Dr. Joel Fuhrman. Okay, Dr. Joel Fuhrman, I think, is one of the most excellent people on macronutrient, what he calls, now, I have problems with him because I don't think he's as good as Atkins with how he judges what is worth eating. That's my only problem with Dr. Fuhrman. I think Atkins does better in the age-defying diet of how to judge things. However, I do think Dr. Fuhrman is an excellent person. With Dr. Fuhrman, I would put Dr. Greger. Dr. Michael Greger, I think, is an excellent person to read his book, How Not to Die. I've never read I've read the How Not to Die and the How Not to Die cookbook. The How Not to Die cookbook is for people that are too stupid to know how to cook, honestly. But it's still an excellent book if you don't know how to cook properly and you're a vegan. The next book that I would recommend is Joel Wallach. Now, Joel Wallach is probably the guy you want to go to if you want to understand epigenetics. He was the co-founder of the discipline, the scientific discipline of epigenetics, and he was the co-discoverer of epigenetics. He discovered that selenium deficiency can cause cystic fibrosis. He's a very interesting person. He was a veterinarian, and he's also a naturopathic doctor, and I recommend people read his books, particularly the one, it's called Dead Doctors Don't Lie, and the other one is Epigenetics. In the book Epigenetics, it's amazing. He goes through the whole history of medicine from like witchcraft onward. Very excellent, excellent, excellent author. He's written a lot of books. He's always writing a book of some kind or another. He's in his late 80s. He doesn't look like a strapping young man, but he is healthy, and I think he's in his late 80s, maybe his early 90s. But I can't seem to find his interviews. I think they're being shadow banned now on YouTube. But he is a very interesting person, and I highly recommend people read Dead Doctors Don't Lie. And I also highly recommend people read his book Epigenetics, which talks about epigenetics. The downside of epigenetics is I do believe that he favors epigenetics over genetics. And I don't think that's how it goes, okay? And I think that epigenetics proves that it's not nature versus nurture. It's nature and nurture together, which are what make a healthy organism. And even Charles Darwin knew that from the beginning. And that's all for this video. I'll leave links in the description to these folks.